Welcome to the 2023 edition of Trieste Next. I'm Luca, an AI-generated speaker who will presenting our festival. In the next 3 days, we will be talking about a new world. This is the title of the 12th edition of our Festival of Science. Innovation and research, the ethical limits and new frontiers of science will be the center of all our events. What will the new world be like? Will we be able to face the challenges of the near future applying new scientific discoveries and technologies in a sustainable way? This will be the underlying theme of Trieste Next, with 100 events in English and Italian, the Science Book of the Year Literary Award, 300 speakers, 70 activities for schools and 40 exhibition spaces that are open for everybody in the city center close to the town hall. Before leaving the floor to our next panelists, I would like to thank all the scientific institutions within the Trieste City of Knowledge Network, the main partner together with our content partners and sponsors for supporting our project. Mostly, thank you to the 200 volunteers who are helping us. I have one last remark for all of you. The next event will last 75 minutes. Our speakers will answer all of your questions in the final 15 minutes. Also, please remember to check the updated schedule of events on our website. Thank you and enjoy our festival.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to the panel discussion titled I Lost My Job to an AI Chatbot. Brace yourselves for a thrilling and thought-provoking conversation that will keep you on the edge of your seats. As we embark on this extraordinary journey, allow me to introduce you to our remarkable moderator for today's panel, the one and only Marco Zanero. With his expertise as a research scientist at the ICTP in Trieste, specializing in AI on really small devices, Marco is here to ignite our imaginations and shed light on the astounding advancements in the world of artificial intelligence. Without further ado, let's give a thunderous applause to Marco Zanero as he takes the stage to set this exhilarating discussion in motion.
Okay, so welcome to the afternoon session on I lost my job to an AI chatbot. I wonder if, in the future, the place of the moderator will be taken by an avatar like this one. And we have 3 great speakers today that will shed some light on the future of AI and job creation or job losses. So AI is a complex and evolving field, as we know, that has many potential impacts on job and the future of work. Some experts believe that AI will replace many jobs, while others argue that AI will create new jobs and enhance existing ones. Just a few points to consider before introducing the speakers. So Goldman Sachs, a couple of years ago, had a report where they said that AI could replace 300 million full-time jobs. And that's about a quarter of all the jobs now carried out by humans in the US and the UK. So it's, huge amount of jobs that will be lost. But according to the same report, 60% of workers nowadays are in occupations that did not exist in 1940. So even now we do jobs that wouldn't exist years ago. The World Economic Forum has another view, and they say that AI could create new jobs and new fields of work and lead to a large expansion in other jobs. In fact, they say that AI create opportunities to raise AI trainers, explainers, and sustainers. And they say that trainers are the people developing AI, such as engineers and scientists. Explainers are the people making AI easy to use for members of the public, such as teachers and consultants. And sustainers are the people ensuring AI is ethical and reliable, such as auditors and regulators. Other reports say that AI will increase productivity. In fact, PricewaterhouseCoopers said that AI could contribute to $16 trillion increase in the global economy in 2030, boosting GDP up to 14%. So, as you can see, many different points of view. What is sure that the AI will change the nature of work and the skills required for it. So in summary, AI is likely to have both positive and negative effects on jobs and the future of work, and the exact outcomes will depend on how AI is developed, deployed, and regulated. as well as how workers, employers, and society will respond to it. So let's dive into the discussion, and I will introduce the three panelists in the order in which they will present. So John Shawe-Taylor is a professor at University College London in the UK. He was the director of the Center for Computational Statistics and Machine Learning at UCL. And he's also the director of IRCAI, which is a UNESCO Category 2 institute on AI based in Ljubljana. Luca Bertolucci, which replaces Aifric Campbell, which couldn't come for an emergency. He's a full professor at computer science at the University of Trieste and leading the AI lab, and he manages the master in AI at the University of Trieste. Teresa Scantamburlo, she's a professor at Foscari University in Venice in the Department of Environmental Science, Informatics and Statistics, and her research is about the ethics of AI, and she was a postdoctoral researcher in Venice and at the University of Bristol in the UK. So let's start by asking to John, so what is AI and why are we worried about AI compared to other technologies? So we're not that worried about, PCs, getting to, loss of jobs.
Yes, okay, welcome everyone and thanks for the invitation. I think it's a really interesting discussion because AI is so covered in mystery in terms of what it actually is. So if we wind back to before AI hit the main headlines maybe 5 years ago, we had huge amounts of automation in computer systems, doing immense computations that humans would not dream of being able to do. Weather prediction, for example, solving vast amounts of computation to make a prediction, sometimes not so accurate, but sometimes quite good. So we've had automation in many, many things that we actually as humans would find very hard to do. And at that time, when we thought about it as researchers, there was a frustration because the things that humans found easy to do, like recognizing an object, talking, discussing, etc., all of those things that we would find really easy to do, actually computers found very hard. And it was almost impossible to get computers at that time to even recognize simple objects in images. And so then AI has transformed that situation. And it's been presented as somehow a very mysterious addition to the, let's say, base of techniques. Whereas in fact, it's much closer to the way we do things than everything that went before. So it should be easier for humans to understand what AI is. And the reason that it's not is I think the way it has been made mysterious. So what I'm hoping to do now is convince you it's actually very easy to understand what AI is, and actually that will give you a much better understanding of how and why and when and to what extent this might impact our lives. So the key understanding, I think, is to think about the way we actually learn new facts and understand new situations. What we do is we take a lot of information and we try to look for a common pattern in that information. And then when we see it, we say, aha, I understand. And we see how this actual set of data that we've looked at makes sense and how we can use that in the future. So if we look out the window and we see there are dark clouds, it's quite likely it's going to rain. And we've learned that association, and we take our umbrella, and we're probably, if you're English, of course, maybe you don't, but, and you are protected from the rain. So you're using that learned information, or you walked on a certain route and you found that at certain times of the day it's not a good route to take, you take another route. All of these things we do simply through experience and through gathering information. AI is doing exactly that, but at an industrial scale. So what it is doing is collecting information. For example, it might be images with labels saying whether there is or not a certain object in the image. And then we've developed computer systems that can take that information in the same way that we as humans do, extract from it the pattern, and then use that pattern then to make a prediction on future. So we learn that if we process this image in a certain way, we'll get a prediction as to whether it actually contains that object or not. And similarly, the example of ChatGPT, we take a huge amount of information from the internet, we learn how to essentially reproduce parts of that information that might be missing, and that we are then able to do in new data, and that enables us to generate new text that is very similar to parts of the text that it has ingested. So it is actually learned to develop a kind of way of generating text that has come from integrating all of the text that it has been given from the internet and is then able to essentially regurgitate. Now, I don't know whether you've had this experience, but sometimes I find myself saying things I didn't expect to say. And it's as if a voice in your head is speaking. And I think that is the ability that we have that is very similar to ChatGPT. Of course, we always think twice, or usually try to think twice before we actually say that thing. And if it's not appropriate, we hopefully stop ourselves in time. Sometimes not. But the ChatGPT has exactly the same problem. It's generating content that might be inaccurate, and of course, ChatGPT itself has a wrapper that is attempting to mitigate those errors and to control them. However, what one must realize is that once this is at an industrial scale, there are pluses and minuses. It has incorporated a huge amount of information, but it has also, therefore, extended beyond probably the capacity of any living human being in terms of the amount of different information that it is able to talk about or reproduce. I asked it to write a beginning of a novel in an Agatha Christie style. It comes out with something really amazingly good. And my daughter, who's a great fan of Agatha Christie, was completely dumbfounded by this. But ask it to write an Agatha Christie novel, it will not do a good job because it will not be able to put together a complex plot. So we need to think about what can it do, what can't it do, understand and how it is able to do what it's able to do. And that, I think, will give us the ability to think creatively about how we can make use of this technology in new ways. And this is the point about new jobs that may, be suggested through the use of these innovative and exciting technologies. So, however, I don't want to underestimate the dangers, and I think, there probably will be jobs lost, and there also will be misuses of the technology, which is, I think, already happening, and so we have to be thinking about the ethical dimensions here and how we may be able to prepare people and control the use of the technology in a way that will mitigate the dangers that it does pose. I'll stop there.
Super, thank you very much, John. So, Luca, are you part of the optimists in AI will create new jobs, or do you think AI will make us lose some jobs? And what kind of jobs? I mean, if you read on the internet, there's many anecdotes. Right? They say that taxi drivers in London, they earn less because now there's GPS and kind of Google Maps, so they don't need to memorize all the streets. Will that apply to many other jobs? How do you see that?
So thank you, Marco. Thanks to everybody who is here. I have to apologize. I was called into duty the very last minute, and unfortunately, I'm not exactly an expert of the sociology of work, more like an AI practitioner like John. So the things that I will say are probably not very clever or grounded, so take them as, with the right level of detachment.
Feel free to correct what I was saying.
No, that was pretty fine. I fully agree. So am I an optimist or a pessimist? Well, to be honest, I'm probably both and neither of them. So I think there are arguments on both sides which make sense, but So my feeling is that sometimes all the discussion is missing the actual points which are behind. So let's take a look at the issue. So what's the issue? There's people, I mean, in fact, experts, okay, when you look at somehow what's the opinion of experts, there's two opinions. So everybody agrees that these AI, which is anyway a technology which is into this flow of technology connected to digitalization and automation, which is not something new, is there for many years. I mean, exploded after the Second World War with the actual, advent of computers as we know them, and has changed significantly the job market since then. Job market means the jobs, the professions, so what we can do. It increased our capabilities of tackling and managing and solving problems at a scale. So we could do things that we could not do 40, 50, 60 years ago just because they require a lot of computation that now we have and we didn't have back then the chance to do it. So everybody agrees that this new technology, this new wave of artificial intelligence is going to create and destroy jobs. So it will impact. Okay, some jobs are at risk of being automated. In fact, they are slowly being automated, and so they will slowly disappear, at least in the form that we know them now. So maybe they were not disappearing, but are going to change, and maybe you don't need anymore 100 people doing a certain task, but you just need 20 people to do the same task. And this is, in fact, the hallmark of automation. As an anecdote, there is factories, like manufacturing plants. So in the past, you needed a lot of workers doing very repetitive jobs to actually produce something. And today, there exist automatic manufacturing plants, and now the human presence is reduced to supervising, what is happening in the different in the different machines. So there's one of these factories, I think maybe the first in Europe, built in Villach by a microprocessor company called Infineon, and it said that from 4,000 workers, the amount of workers that they need is 400, so 1/10. Okay, so that's automation. Is not even there's no GPT behind. It's just there's a lot of AI. In fact, a lot of data science, a lot of analyzing and collecting data and analyzing data, but not something which we would call human intelligence. On the other hand, and we've seen it already, digitalization also brings new professions who 20 years ago have thought about social media managers. There were no social media managers, but actually there's a lot of people now is doing these professions. And maybe this profession is one which is going to be is going to change due to the fact that we have chatbots that are able to write and summarize and process text in a very effective and human-like way. So yes, so there will be changes. This is for sure. Now, is it there will be a plus or a minus in the job balance? I think nobody really knows. This will pretty much depend on things that they're likely to happen or not likely to happen in the future, but nobody has a crystal ball, and whoever makes a forecast is typically wrong. So I won't do any forecast, and the answer is, but then I think what we need, so I think that what is important here is to be aware of the changes that are going to happen. Be aware of these changes means several things. The first thing means to get an understanding of, at least to have an idea, of what these technologies are, what they can do, and how they can effectively change. And so also to be, let's say, aware that some of the promises that you hear around, they may be a little bit overestimating the actual powers. And maybe there are other areas instead in which things are already changing significantly that we don't talk about. But indeed, things will happen. So again, particularly, things may change quickly if we bump into another crisis like 2008. There's a nice example in 2008. So from 2008 to now, there's one sector which lost 25% of jobs. You know which one it is? It's banking. Banking. So bank all over Europe, they, due to that crisis which touched them in 2008, decided essentially to push towards the digitalization, home banking, okay, and they start closing physical outposts in the territory, in physical offices in the territory, and reduced, in Italy there is 90,000 less workers in the bank sector, okay? And that's not even, I mean, it's not GPT, this is just digitalization, but similar things are going to happen, particularly when we are pushed towards certain changes by, I don't know, crisis or whatever problem. The other thing that is important to be, one has clearly to be aware of, is the fact that artificial intelligence technologies today require a lot of money, really a lot of money, a huge amount of money to be developed. And as far as it is, in Europe, there's no one which is able to develop them at a scale. And those which are developing them at a scale are big companies like Google, like Microsoft, well, which is OpenAI, like Amazon, and so on. Because building GPT costs hundreds of millions. And there's no university center, no university, not even cluster of universities in Europe, or even public institutions around the world, which have this amount of money to use to try something which may work or not, and you don't know, right? So there's still a bit of uncertainty when you do science in this respect. So it means that also this technology is in the hands of few people. And this also brings a great question, which is a question of democratization of artificial intelligence, of democratization of these technologies, of how we ensure that the profit, the extra profit that they generate, that they're likely to generate, maybe a lot of billions or trillions, is actually not going into the hands of few, leaving or increasing significantly the scale of inequality that we have in society. So I think that even more about jobs, what is even more relevant is how we are going to regulate the system and how we are going to impose also regulation at the economical level to avoid this tendency of exploding inequality, which we see also in our societies. And to this, being aware of this also require, and somehow being in a certain sense, active and present in society when these matters are discussed is very important. Otherwise, if you don't care, if you don't think you can do anything, if you don't participate, and there are initiatives, European Union is trying to push a lot of citizen engagement also in this respect. If you don't care, then somebody else will decide, and then this may not be on your own benefit, maybe, but on the other side, on your own detriment. So that's, I think, a good message to give.
Super. So that leads to regulation, right, in some way. So I'm sure, Teresa, you have seen these pictures of teachers in their 60s, you know, with signs against calculators. And they say, you know, kids shouldn't use calculators in schools. And we're in this kind of same situation with AI now. So what is the status of regulation? Should AI be regulated? We heard from Luca that maybe that's, you know, the direction we should take.
Yeah. So thanks for the invitation, and the topic is extremely interesting. Okay, regulation is one of possible solutions. I think that the main concern is about governance. So we have this powerful technology operating on a large scale and influencing a lot of decisions that can be impactful for people. So we should be able, or at least we should work in a way to govern and to control the behavior of such systems. And regulation is for sure an option, and I think is a good option. And the reason why I think regulation is at least part of the solution to govern AI is that, first of all, as I said, is operating on large scale across different sectors, private and public sectors, and is used to impact and to inform decisions that can affect human lives. So decisions concerning, for example, college admissions, or the management of human resources and companies, or production lines, but even, I mean, medicines, medical treatments. So there are many decisions that have concrete and material consequences on people. And usually lay people are not in the position to understand the consequences that such system, the use of such systems may have on their life. So for that reasons, I think that regulation is a way to protect more vulnerable people. So people who may not be aware that systems are used. And so I think this is for sure one of the most important reasons. And another second important reason is the fact that these, let's say, negative consequences, harms associated to the use of AI are not necessarily the results of a malicious intention. So programmers or firms which start, I mean, building systems with the aim of harming people. But more frequently, the risk associated to AI systems represent the side effect, kind of side effect, that are results from, let's say, poor design decisions, or simply aspects that are ill-considered or not sufficiently and carefully considered. And one of the most important aspects, which I think is not sufficiently considered, is the fact that when we build these systems, we are not just talking about techniques, but we are talking about socio-technical systems. So we are connecting social processes, existing rules. So for example, consider, I mean, systems that might be used for distributing social care benefits. So systems that are used to inform decisions by social care services to distribute and allocate benefits across the society. So there are existing rules in place, there are routines, there are regulations, and there are data that are used by these systems that come from people. So these systems, which are used to detect patterns and make predictions for, I mean, future decisions, are based on previous representations of the population. And how do we represent this population? What type of features are used? So these all this information shape the whole socio-technical systems, and the regulation is a way to make people, the so-called AI actors, so those who are involved, actively involved in the creation and the maintenance of these systems, are taken responsible. So it's a way to make these people responsible, or at least to take the responsibility of their decisions. So I think that the regulation is, I mean, needed, at least to tackle, to cope, at least with these issues. Of course, in any case, it's not sufficient, in my opinion, because we need to also work to create a culture of responsible designs, and this also is cultivated through education or even through other initiatives, even like this. So communications and dissemination activities to make the population aware also of this technology, and at least participate in the public debate, or at least to create opinion on this. And the good news is that Europe, at least, has made a step forward in this direction, because proposed a regulation nearly years ago, and has been discussed by the European Parliament, and hopefully we will have a regulation in the coming years. Of course, the proposal is not perfect, but I think has many, at least good elements that will help us to encourage, to let's say, support this responsible design and to ensure that certain ethical and lawful uses of AI are ensured. So in case we will talk a little bit more about the regulations, I don't know, I don't want to, spend too much time now, but I'm happy also to discuss a little bit about what this regulation look like.
Sure. Super. So, John, you mentioned, in the last couple of years we have been discussing about, AI, ChatGPT, and so on. But AI is not that new, right? It went through many phases. It was this winter of AI when, it was kind of in a crisis. And so my question is, do you think that kind of pattern will repeat itself in the future? Of course, you don't have the crystal ball, but my point is, do you think, like an exponential growth in research, for example, in the field of AI?
Yeah, I think what tends to happen is there's over-promising what it can do in the past, at least, and that has led to huge surge of interest and investment, and then the results have not come through in the way that was predicted, and then there's been a kind of retrenchment of disappointment and, oh, this is not going anywhere. And that's been somewhat backed up by, I think there's the enthusiasm that you see in researchers for AI has been a little overstepped, and to some extent, you sort of see the light in their eyes. They become, a little bit like believers. And science somewhat goes out the window, and it's kind of, and we see these debates that still, to this day, have that flavor of, different creeds, shall we say. So I think, scientists are, also here part responsible for not being careful about the way they are presenting what they do, also being careful to, point out shortcomings, point out advantages, but also disadvantages and dangers. And I think, I agree very much with what was said about the situation with respect to regulation, that we're in a very good situation, that people are thinking ahead. The number of debates that have been had about the ethics of AI and about how we should be thinking about it is, I think, remarkable, and we should be really grateful for that. And I think that, but I think it's still very much unfinished business. That's what I would say on the ethics. And I think we have a lot more to do. If you think about the investment that's gone into developing the technology itself, and then the amount of money that's being put to thinking about the ethics, it's a little bit of an imbalance. And we need to address that balance. And I think when we do think more seriously and in depth about the ethics, and that will require, also to the level of philosophical thinking and questions and debates, I believe that we will reach, perhaps a very different approach to regulation than we're thinking about at the moment. I mean, the AI Act is great, but it's very risk-based, and it's sort of trying to regulate the sort of edges where things are really dangerous. But I think more is needed really to think about how to empower humans and to ensure humans are in control. And this is the sort of human-centric agenda. And that, I think, will carry the public then to an understanding of AI, which is sort of what I was trying to do at the beginning. Because I think until, everyone has a good understanding, or the majority of people have a good understanding of what AI can do, there will be the opportunity very wide open for the misuse of AI. I think the only real guard against the misuse of AI is if people are savvy enough to spot it themselves. And I think absolutely people are capable of doing that. If we're able to read another human being who is significantly, infinitely more complex than an AI system, for sure we're going to be capable to understand AI if we're given the information we should be given that we're not given at the moment, which is the problem is that systems are not being transparent in the way they operate. They're gathering information without letting you know. They're using it in a way that they don't let you know. So I think regulation should be about that question of how, making more transparent how they are using your information and what they're doing it with it and what the purpose of that is. And regulating around that, I think, would be, it's a very, that's a very incomplete story, but that would be the direction I think we should be thinking about. But to come back to the question, I think the number of uses of AI that we're seeing means that there won't be a significant winter. I think the fact that it is now really embedded in so many significant, applications and, let's say, systems that will generate money, there's going to be the energy to carry on. But there will be shifts. For instance, I understand from DeepMind that was deeply into the optimization through reinforcement learning. The AlphaGo story was being carried on and used to try to find ways to optimize. They've been really kind of shaken by the ChatGPT, and they're putting a lot more money now and effort into the generative AI, this kind of side of things. So there's shifts that are happening, and I'm sure there will be more of those to come. And of course, the absolute excitement and hype we're seeing now will subside, of course. But I think there will be a core effort going on in AI that will never be at that level of winter that we've seen in the past. That would be my prediction. Crystal ball, I'll probably be wrong.
You have been recorded, Okay, look, I have a question about, education. So we heard from the World Economic Forum, they say that they're going to be trainers, which are like engineers and scientists, developing AI. But then they also say that there's going to be explainers, so people that, make AI easy to use for members of society. So my question is there any attempt to create these explainers, or are we in, the phase of training, experts and trainers?
Well, that's a very good question. Mechanics. We're still there. So that's a very good question. So education here is it's a big point, and also if we think stepping 1 second back, if we think at what is likely going to happen, let's say to the job market or to job profiles, which will be affected by AI. I mean, some jobs may disappear, but most of the jobs will just change the way you actually carry on this job. New jobs will be created, and so what's going to happen for sure is that we will need to put a lot of effort in permanent education of society. So not just the master programs at university or bachelor or university studies, not just rethinking how we teach kids from 3 years to 18. They need to be empowered with some keys to read the society they live in. We cannot just, ancient Greek is fine, but if you know ancient Greek, I have no idea of what is a computer or some of the principles that are behind digitalization, then you may be in big trouble, actually, because you cannot read the society which is around you and the trends that are happening. So education, and then there will be the task of training people which is already working with new skills, with new abilities to remain, let's say, it's called competitive on the job market, but to be able to continue to work. So that's a good question. Now, AI explainers. I think I see steps in this direction. So I don't see a big jump yet in this direction, but indeed, So what we probably need to do is to invest a bit more on some profiles which have some technical skills and some human science skills that are capable of fostering and improving the interaction with these technologies. Explaining artificial intelligence is also a big question by itself, because let's be honest, despite a lot of research and a lot of techniques that are coming out, nobody's really able to explain how ChatGPT works. And here I think there is an issue. I'm sorry, now I'm stepping back from the sociologist and to the computer scientist part, which is related to complexity. So you were mentioning these things before, socio-technical systems, right? So first of all, artificial intelligence models that are working now are working because we have large computational power, and they are very big in terms really of memory they consume, size of the models that are built. These big models are complex, and they behave in complex ways. And as my personal feeling is that this complexity is not something that we can reduce to few basic principles that can explain everything, but is there to remain. Like, I mean, there are several things in the world which are complex. Our brain is complex. We don't really understand how the brain works, despite we are looking into this for many, many years. Even more, socio-technical systems are even more complex. And this is also very interesting because when artificial intelligence comes into society, it typically comes in a sort of interactive way with all other people. And the results of these interactions are very hard to foresee, and they are typically very far away from the design principles and the goals of the AI system which has been built. An example, think about the algorithms that are running behind Facebook to recommend posts and news to read. These were essentially designed to maximize clicks and to maximize the return in advertisement of Facebook itself. So it was a profit-based design. But the fact of this has been to propose a certain kind of context to more and more to people, and so create a sort of reinforced system which created a lot of polarization in the public opinion. If you start reading things about conspiracy theory, then you get everything about conspiracy theory. You get convinced about it, and then you become a believer of the flat Earth. So that's the kind of effect that nobody thought at the beginning, but is happening. And actually, that's the point. We do not know how to control these systems. So when you ask Zuckerberg, please remove fake news, well, they say, I would like to, but I don't know how. Nobody knows how. So there's also a big scientific gap here in trying to understand better how to understand and try to control these systems. And now for an explainability. What does it mean, explainability, to me is a very undefined word, because if it means that a human being is capable of understanding what is going on, then I think this is something that we simply cannot do, because we have not enough brain power to understand how GPT works. It's too complex for us. If it's about trying to distill some simplified pattern, or trying to make the process transparent in such a way that maybe other algorithms are able to look into it and understand if there was some malicious action, or where the problem was with a certain bad choice, then it's a different story. And this is something that we definitely have to work on and enforce. So I totally agree with that. That, I think, is the clear point. So explainable AI, to my understanding, is a bit delicate, but also this means that if you want to use an AI system big, like a big neural network, for safety critical decision, or decisions that are going to impact the life of people, like I give you a mortgage, I don't give you a mortgage, you have also to be very careful, because you may not be able to justify, so you may be able to build up some justification, but it's made up justification. It's not really an explanation of what is going on.
So then, Teresa, how can we regulate something we don't fully understand? I think that's a unique case, right, in the history of humanity in some way.
I mean, in fact, I mean, regulation, as I said, is not, I mean, the unique solution, and is not perhaps enough, but at least is an important step forward. But may I also say something about these classifications of, you mentioned trainer, explainer, and supporter, or something like regulators, and I would also add, all people who are used to train more or less indirectly or to maintain, annotate the data sets which are used to train such systems. So the whole input that is necessary for these machines to work and make predictions. So for example, a famous, one of the scandal, that is recently connected to the ChatGPT is that OpenAI apparently employed this or outsourced to a company with workers in Africa, in Kenya, to, for example, moderate and identify hate speech or all this violent speech in text. And these people, these workers were interviewed, and they expressed anxiety and stress in being 80 or more 10 hours reading full text of and descriptions of violence and pornographic images and so on, and for just less than $2 per hour. So there is also a huge, large part of the population who perhaps could represent another portion, in this pipeline, in this broad ecosystem to maintain AI. And so perhaps I would also raise as concerns of creating a job market which is AI-centric, which I don't know if this might be, something that we want, and perhaps we should be, discuss this. But going back to the regulation, okay, the European AI Act, the proposal, first of all, doesn't regulate the whole AI. The main, first of all, it uses a definition that might be questionable. So, the European Commission, but also other groups which have worked for example, the high-level expert group developing the European ethics guidelines for AI, provided some definitions, and as you know, defining things is not easy, especially areas like and systems like artificial intelligence. So I think that a good move that is in the regulation is that basically we're not regulating specific techniques, AI techniques, but the focus is on the uses. So the focus is, first of all, a risk-based approach. And the idea is that there are certain uses which are prohibited. And these uses, for example, include AI systems that are used to manipulate people, or systems that use some features or sensitive features or vulnerabilities to influence or to inform human decisions, or systems used for social scoring, so basically systems which are used to measure somehow people, so to use numbers to represent people and give us access to different services. So these uses are considered unlawful, so not permitted. And then there are other systems that can be used in critical domains, like, for example, education or medicines, or for immigration, for example, border controls. All these systems, there is basically the regulations provided in the annex, a list of areas which are critical. And when AI systems are used to support decisions or to influence workflows which are operating in these areas, are considered high risk. There are also other systems that can be embedded. For example, AI systems could be embedded in medical devices, So, for example, medical devices are already regulated, so in that case would be considered high risk, but so the requirements should be integrated into broader regulations. But when we are dealing and coping with high-risk systems, the AI providers or the deployers of such systems should ensure certain requirements and should carefully consider whether the systems is aligned with certain requirements. The requirements, for example, the first one is a risk management system. It means that people, providers of such system, should consider what are possible risks, what are possible misuses, for example, or uses or effects, foreseeable effects of the system, and trying to estimate the harm that certain uses could have on people, and trying to figure out, for example, what kind of measures or countermeasures could be deployed in order to cope with this in case these harms occur. Another important, for example, requirement regarding transparency. Transparency could mean, for example, for sure, trying to integrate systems with other techniques, for example, allowing other people to interpret the results, but it also means, for example, being clear on the capabilities and the limitations of this system. So, for example, the AI providers should clearly state what the system is, what are the limitations, what the system cannot do, for example. So this, I think, is important to clarify the expectations, what we should expect from systems. And there is another requirement, for example, dealing with the documentation, which is something that is critical, I think, for even engineers, computer scientists, because all decisions should be documented. Also the data that are used, all the metrics that are used to measure the performance of such systems. So there are many concrete actions that should be taken by the AI providers in order to, document and to motivate and justify, or even to, clarify the use of such systems. And so, of course, this is not, the panacea, I would say, but at least is a step allowing those who are in a position which is critical, because there is a kind of asymmetry, a power asymmetry between those who have the knowledge, the skills, and the expertise and the power, like you were mentioning all these big companies, so who are in the positions to make decisions, and those who are not, who are the subjects of these completely new markets. So I think that, the regulation is an important step to force these people at least to trying to reason and to be more aware, and to also carefully consider what they are doing and what might be the effect of their work. So these are some, so if you like, there is also in the new version of the Parliament, the European Parliament, there is also some rules concerning the so-called foundation models. So they introduce also some specific rules for these models, where they should again provide documentations, specify the purpose, and so on. And there are also some specific transparency rules for the so-called deep fake. So all contents which are generated, for example, by using deep learning, and which is not real, I mean, is completely generated by an artificial intelligent agent, should be clearly state that this is a content produced by an AI system.
Thank you very much. That was very interesting, point of views, and I think we have shed some light and we have a clear idea. Any questions from the audience? Yes, please.
Yeah, my question is about the use of AI in creative fields such as photography and, for example, screenwriting. I don't know if you heard about it, but earlier this year in April, the Sony World Photography Award was won by an image that then was revealed to be AI generated. And right now in America, in Hollywood, screenwriters are actually on a strike because studios are actually thinking about replacing them with AI. Do you think that's feasible, or is it something that it's not achievable, so human creativity by an artificial intelligence? Thank you.
I will answer. Tra I due litiganti. So that's a good question. In fact, what is human creativity? I think the terms of the questions are a bit hard to define. But another bit of news. In June, the German news agent newspaper Bild fired 200 journalists to replace them with AI-empowered algorithms. Of course, the tasks that they were probably going to replace were sort of revision tasks or sort of a bit of repetitive but highly skilled tasks, which now something like GPT can actually do reasonably well. Now, of course, the question is, but is GPT going to be able to also to write news and articles as well as a human alone? And I think this is, at the moment, this is still very unlikely, and so it's also very unlikely that you will be able to use GPT to actually generate a script of something which is interesting, because the way these technologies work. Okay, so these are devices which are designed to generate the next word, word by word, and I mean, to think about a plot is something very different. So it's a lot of design and thinking and, going back to your decisions and revising. So it's a lot of planning, which is not embedded in these devices. I mean, you can think about more complicated stuff. Maybe something will come out in the future, for sure. It will come out in the future. But to a certain extent, what I feel is that as humans, we will be naturally give more value to content created by humans than by machines. So that is probably, there's a sort of antibodies, I think, that there are in the system. Yes, what can happen is obviously that you can use these tools to accelerate your creativity, right? And instead of taking 6 months to write a play, you can take 2 weeks because you have the idea, you play with these tools, you design, you write parts of them, you guide them to a possible solution. So this is going to change these jobs significantly. I don't think it's going to cancel these jobs. And I think that the reason why it's not going to cancel these jobs is because we will not accept that as a society.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the very interesting speech. And my is mostly a curiosity, and I don't know who may answer to this, but from the experience I had, I am interested in asking, first, how much because I think we haven't talked a lot about how much is important the initial set of data we train our model on, how big should it be in terms of information, and probably in order to avoid certain kind of bias that, of course, somebody introduced with the initial set of data, can be that a part where regulation and if it is done, I don't know, I'm asking this, because, and one last thing, from the very little experience I had with this kind of approaches, so deep learning approaches, as soon as you have, as soon as you can understand why the bias was introduced, I think you are losing a little the complexity of the thing, because at least this is what I experience of, because if you can say from where it comes from, so you're not even talking anymore of a complex systems in terms of what a complex system is. Maybe I haven't explained a lot. Okay, just the example where I know that this was happening was in terms of like a prediction for zinc binding sites, in terms of which amino acid you were choosing off. And I know that the output of because it was my work of thesis too, but it was biased a lot with respect to experimental data that we know, and we know maybe from why it was biased. And so this is a question. Maybe
you want to tackle it?
Give it a go. So in terms of first part was how much data. So, I mean, this is an active research question, very active, because in a sense that's why the systems are so expensive, because they have to process so much data. So would we be able to learn as much without that much data? The question is unanswered as yet. I think it's very active to see if that is possible. I think that the breadth of coverage and the breadth of knowledge of ChatGPT implies that we won't be able to reduce it, you know, very, very significantly if we're going to have that level of breadth. You know, the amount of topics that it's able to answer about is remarkable. I mean, it could write a fairly plausible CV for me, which, I mean, is extraordinary. I mean, you know, this is not, you have to remember, ChatGPT is not looking up anything on the internet when it operates. Everything it is known is in its weights. It's just there. I mean, it was quite generous because it made me 10 years younger than I am, but okay, I was happy with that. But that's a detail. But so it's inaccurate, but it was plausible, is what I'm saying. So it clearly had some information about me in those weights. I mean, if it has information about me, it must have information about a lot of people out there. So it is extraordinary how much information has been actually embedded. So what I'm trying to say is it's not going to be a lot of reduction. What I think could be possible is that the training times could be reduced significantly, again, by more clever use of that information, combinations of it. And again, that's an open research question. In terms of the bias, so again, I think we might be talking about different things. Bias in what I would think of is the kind of ways in which information is encoding the kind of prejudices that society has. And, you know, we've seen this in the past in, you know, system, I think it was Amazon that trained the system that was trying to predict whether a CV would be, you know, should be shortlisted for interview. And they basically trained it on the past data they had from, you know, CVs they processed and people they'd appointed. And they tried this system, and then somebody looked at a CV and it, you know, said, yeah, this person should be interviewed, and then the name was John whatever Smith, and they changed it to June Smith or Jane Smith, and it rejected it. So it was simply the sex of the applicant was forcing a different decision. So the actual CV was identical, but because it was a female, the system thought. So clearly that was encoding some information about the prejudice of recruiters at Amazon. So AI was actually revealing the bias. It wasn't it was reproducing the bias, but the bias was in the data that was given to it to train. So in a sense, here AI was doing a good job because it was holding up a mirror to, in this case, whichever company it was. Maybe I'm wrong, it wasn't Amazon, forgive me if I said that wrongly, but and I think they took it very well, and they actually saw that as something they could learn from. And actually, the whole study of how do we measure bias has arisen from observations of this type. So now we have measures of fairness that are now objective. So I think, again, a win for AI, that AI has been able to give us tools which will enable us to measure, in some sense, more objectively bias relative to certain characteristics like male, female, or whatever other racial or whatever characteristics. That's all potentially good news, but what I do think we're lacking is an understanding of how to package this all together in a way that will actually influence the training. I think what's happening at the moment is, ChatGPT is putting a wrapper around their generation models, which is trying to catch, biased or inappropriate content and not let it be sent to the user. But that's almost like, after the, it's like what I was saying, I hear a voice in your mind saying something and you think, oh, I shouldn't probably say that. and that's sort of what this wrapper is doing. But obviously it would be much better if we could understand and decode that bias from the system itself. That's, again, I think, work still in progress. Hopefully that's answered some of the questions.
Thank you. I would like to know about something more about regulations, in the sense that, do you think there is a time within which these rules have to be set up? Because otherwise it will be too late. And who is going to set up these rules? Some, European Parliament, the local parliaments, who is going to devise these regulations? Each country in itself.
I mean,
Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, this is an easy question because the rules are already, discussed. So now, I think the Council is discussing. So perhaps we will have the regulation in European Union, perhaps in 2024. So the proposal, the proposal is available, and for those who are interested, it might be nice also if you want to read or to check, but these are available online, the proposal. I think the amendments of the Parliament are available as well, but the European Union regulation is the first example that we will have operational, perhaps, I don't know, in 2 years, 3 years. I don't know now the bureaucratic process for making the regulation fully operational, but the regulation will be ready soon.
Are there any more questions from the audience? Well, as we still have a few minutes, one question then. So this is a European regulation, but some of these tools are not European tools, right? So how do these regulations apply to,
So providers, any AI providers introducing in the market AI services which are used also in the European market should be compliant. So even, for example, if you are a firm based in United States or somewhere outside the European Union, but if you are operating in Europe, you must comply with the EU AI Act.
I mean, there are other regulations being considered. The Council of Europe is also considering a regulation that might be proposed or put forward, possibly with a limitation to certain areas like AI and education, but also considering more broadly. The Council of Europe is broader than the European Union. It also includes many other countries. And this would be, again, a legally binding agreement, if adopted, that would require all countries of the Council of Europe to adopt that regulation. The United Nations is also now convening a group to consider proposals for regulation. And OECD, the whatever it's, I'm not sure what it stands for, I always forget, but whatever.
European, I mean,
which has also been drafting a kind of recommendation document, which has been influencing the European Union's document, but is separate from it in terms of both definitions and the regulation. So there's a lot going on, but I absolutely agree with your statement. You know, it would be bad to close the door after the horse has bolted, as it were, and I think we're in danger of doing that. The other thing, what I was saying earlier, I think, you know, the amount of effort that's been put into developing the AI, we really need to see some commensurate effort put into thinking about regulation, because I think, you know, again, a knee-jerk regulation is not going to really solve the problem. And I think really we need to also think about how to make the public savvy in terms of understanding how AI can influence their lives and how they need to be aware of what it might be doing to them and how they can also use it creatively. If we can reach that stage, I think we'll be in a very good trajectory of a positive outcome in the use of AI if we're making crystal ball predictions.
Okay, so if there is no more questions, I think we can wrap up. I think from what we heard, we can be a bit on the optimistic side. There's some regulation going on. We heard that research is tackling some of the open issues, and we're forming, you know, generation of new, you know, experts and explainers. So I'm on the optimistic side.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good. Grazie.